Welcome to the Rugby Bits podcast, and we've got an exciting episode for you guys today. We're going to go through round 16 of the United Rugby Championship. We're going to have a tour of the rugby world. No more internationals to talk about at the moment, except for the Women's Six Nations, which started this weekend. And then we're going to, at the end, preview the last 16 games for the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup. I'm with Shaun today, and we are so excited to talk about all of this. Shaun, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you? Before I pop your question there, good. Had a good weekend, a bit of ruggers, and managed to get in a braai and a bit of chill time as well, which is always good. But you had a flippin' rad weekend. How was it?
Yeah, no, I was at a wedding. I actually want to shout out my friend from high school, Kieran Harris, who, when the bride and the groom, they do that questionnaire to say which person is more likely to do this and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
They were asked which person is more likely to be on social media, and Kieran said, "Yeah, I'm on social media to support Thala."
Accurate.
So I was like, fair enough. But yeah, great weekend over in Pietermaritzburg. And yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately didn't really catch a lot of the rugby this weekend. But yeah, we're going to go through the games. We're going to see what is going on. Not the best weekend for South African URC teams. Only one win and a draw and 2 losses in our away trip. But yeah, all set up with the Storm's already qualified, but the other 3 South African teams are in contention to still qualify for the last 8. So, Shaun, I think let's start chronologically with the first game of the weekend, which was the Stormers against the BlackRock under 16s or Leinster, C team, or the Rhys Ruddock All Stars, as I've now
That's
called
it.
them.
The Rhys Ruddock All Stars. Sensational chirp. I loved it.
So, yeah, the Stormers drew 22 points all with Leinster. Strong first half. They led basically for most of this first half. And then Leinster just came back really well, using the wind to their advantage, kicking and pinning the Stormers into their half. It seemed like the Stormers weren't really able to handle that, and they were able to get 2 points from this. So I think this, out of the 2 teams, obviously the Stormers should be more disappointed, given that they played with, the Springboks are all back. Forgot to mention that all the Springboks came back from their camp now. So all the South African teams are pretty much at full strength. Leicester don't have all their island players back this weekend. And the Stormers also lost the opportunity to win back first place in the log. So if they qualify and they win everything and Leicester wins everything, they'll have to meet Leinster back in Dublin for the final of the URC. So, Shaun, yeah, how would you summarize this game?
This game could best be summarized as just like it was like a blender. Like the Stormers played well in parts, but then they really played poorly in others. And really, you look at that score, drawing 22-all with Leinster in Dublin, and you're thinking, that's points that they've earned, but the reality of it is the Stormers really could have won that game, and they should have. There were a host of very poor kicks that really cost them. Like some kicks, it was I can't even remember any one person, but like there were 2 or 3. Just the players were just making poor kicks. They were just not accurate, and that hurt them. The commentators weren't really talking about it, and we kind of picked it up towards the end of the first half, but it was kind of like, is this going to be enough points for the Stormers to be able to protect the lead? And it turned out not, because this second half performance by Leinster was very much like that Toulouse performance against Sale, if I'm not mistaken, where it was just pumping wind and they just basically kicked for the corners, just played boring rugby, kicked for the corners and scored, and then just beat them. So the Leinster just used all their experience and home ground advantage and understanding of what was happening and just chipped away and sorted out. And it's frustrating because there was a time when the Stormers looked like they were going to win. There was a time where the Stormers looked like they could maybe come back and win it. could maybe come back and force something. And there was a time where the Stormers looked like they were going to lose. So it was very, very frustrating. And the worst part about it is what this does is this totally reinforces a whole new crop of players that are now going to be dealing with, probably, well, in the club and and possibly international level for a few years to come. So I think it's a weird one. Like they should have won it. They could have lost it, but they drew it. It's just one of those real funny, strange ones. But I think the underlying thing is the guys will walk away from that thinking they really just weren't on their game to win it.
Yeah, and it did follow the script of most of the big Stormers' performances in the last 2 seasons now. Stormers didn't have Stormers conceded possession to Leinster. Stormers only had 36% possession, but when they did have possession, they made many more clean breaks than Leinster did, 6-1. They beat around the same level of defenders beaten. And when you check the tackle stats, Stormers made almost double the tackles that Leinster made, 195 to 109. So the Stormers are a team that don't really mind playing without the ball. They're one of those teams that, because their attack is so good, you don't perceive them as a team that, kicks more and doesn't play with much of the ball. They just want to hit you on the counter-attack. And they played that, seemed like they played at least the structure of that to perfection. It was just that, obviously, number one, they're such a dangerous team. So, if you give them that much ball, they will punish you. And It seems like just looking at those stats, like even individually, someone like Ruben van Heerden making 22 tackles, I mean, probably not what you want to do in a one-off game against Leinster. You don't want people making tackles in the 20s to try and beat them, because obviously players will tire at some stage.
Yeah, and the big thing is Leinster and Ireland are very much process driven. They're like the Bulls team when they won Super Rugby a million times. They're like Saracens. They're like a few like test sides where they have had no reason not to trust the process of what they're doing. They haven't been put under pressure long enough or lost a game in the recent fold with what they're doing. So it's important that you disrupt them. But the biggest thing for me is because they've got now a conveyor belt of youngsters coming through that have been groomed under these superstars, but are also trying to kind of stamp their own mark on the game. But they know it's like the New Zealand rugby setup. You pull anyone from any NPC side or Super Rugby side and put them in the All Black side, they might not be the better player, but they know what to do and where to do it. Like they're very seldom going to do something off script. And this is what needs to happen with Leinster and Ireland, funny enough, is you need to disrupt them. You need to change up what is happening in their world so they start doubting it. But the one thing, and it was highlighted a lot on social media, is the Stormers had an opportunity. It was a swing. It was basically a swing vote to win the game. And they broke away, and Hachiva Diamani broke away down the right-hand side from deep inside his half off a Stephen Kitsoff line-out steal, I might add. I mean, like, just put that one in the books. And Diamani is fast. And if it was any other 8 in the world, maybe not even Ardie Severe is faster than him, I don't think. But any other 8 in the world would have looked to play a winger. But no one of us, fans and anyone, and players was like, this. There's no ways he's going to get reeled in because he's so fast. And he did get reeled in. And then he had to play a pass, and Leinster came back and turned over that ball 5 meters from their own line. And there were 4 or 5 guys that chased back. That's the kind of stuff that is, it's the biggest hat tip to the coaches and the management, but it's the worst thing for anyone else to see, because there is so much talent there, and they will trust everything explicitly to go and do it and win. But then they fight like that to go back. That is, there's something to be said about a players and individuals and a team that does stuff that is not talent related. It's just literally hard work and just that absolute will to chase someone down. And like almost like chase a losing cause, and then somehow you manage to reel it back. So that was key. That was a key moment in the game, but also just something that opens a bit of insight into Leinster and what they're doing there and what is happening and what is going on with the youngsters and the guys coming through.
So let's maybe look at that moment in particular, because yes, you just described that almost 80-meter breakaway that almost led to a Suleiman Hotzenberg try. So the first thing, Shaun, is Daimani, I guess he was stuck in between, do I try to go it by myself and try to pay for the corner, or do I try to sort of go inside so I can connect with, the one supporting player? I'm wondering if he was maybe better suited trying to go it himself, because I think he might have been able to at least, stretch for the corner if he tried to go for it and hopefully just stretch the defense as well, taking them another step or two away from, where they're running from. Because basically the person that caught him was running, or one of the people that caught him and Hotzenberg was running from the opposite wing, and had to sort of make that diagonal run. So I'm wondering if maybe he could have stretched the defense even more by going into the corner.
Yes. That would have been to say that he definitely would have scored or not, it would have been a gamble. The key thing for me is once he gets that ball is where does he start running? And there's a couple of reasons. He ran straight down the line. So essentially what he did was now Hartzenberg had to now change had to move. So there's communication there from Hartzenberg as well. And also it's probably not going to happen again because he got reeled in. But there's a couple of things. Like if he had run 5 meters inside, that covering tackle would have hit him on his left shoulder, and he would have been able to play Hartzenberg on the right, and he would have scored almost definitely. And I think there's a few things that could have happened. I don't want to blame anyone because honestly, 80 meters out, if you tell me that
straight defense,
if you tell me that it's turnover ball, so the defense is not even set, you tell me it's turnover ball and you're 80 meters out and Daimani's got the ball on the touchline, what's going to happen? I'll be like, he's scoring. And I don't think many people thought that he wouldn't. And I don't think many people thought that the Stormers wouldn't. I think the important thing was how he ran and the reasons behind it. So Hartzenberg could have got more involved. Daimani could have changed his line. There are a couple of things. I'm not laying blame. I'm just saying there are options. But the other important thing is remember that there were 4 Leinster defenders chasing back. It wasn't one guy.
Yeah.
4 guys came back. That also changed everything. Because if it was one other guy, if it was 2 guys even, they would have scored as well. So there's a lot of factors that went wrong. It's almost like the perfect storm for the Stormers, and it just didn't work out. Excuse the pun. But we'd all back Daimani to score there, and we'd all back a combo of Daimani and Hartzenberg to score as well. Let's be honest here. We've got 2 of the fastest and most tackle breaking guys out there. So yeah, it's tough. I haven't even really rewatched, specifically dissected that piece. We watched it enough when the game was played, and I saw enough highlights and everything of it. But I maybe want to have another look. But I think it's an unfortunate outcome for the Stormers. Obviously they didn't score, so you can say what you want about what should have happened because something should have gone differently in order for them to score. So there's that. But I don't think you can really put too much blame on everybody, on any single person or collectively for that matter. There's a few things that needed to change. But for me, the big thing was Leinster's 4-man defensive chase.
Yeah, I think it was Rob Russell that did the chase from the other wing.
He got the turnover, brilliant. I think. It was incredible turnover. It was perfect.
He seems like a great game, eh?
Yeah. All of Sardine, eh? Out of nowhere. Oh, well, he's playing at Leinster. We'll show you that he's really good. And we're never heard of this guy. And boof, then in there, everyone then announces himself.
Yeah, that's my now rule with Leinster. They're in that level of clubs like the Crusaders that if you start and play well for Leinster, I just assume you'd probably be decent at Test rugby. I know
if you play for Leinster, you're not shit.
Pretty much.
If you play for Leinster, you're not shit. Don't get your Cook's not even here to have a moan about it. Fergus Burke had a decent game this weekend, to be fair.
He did. Yeah. And then just on the Stormers finally, I mean, they're as close to full strength as they have been for a while, but they're still missing, Simon Morata's probably out for the whole season. We've got Evan Roos, obviously the player of the season last season. He's still coming back from injury. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, it's relatively short term. He probably is back on Saturday, but he would have been great in the midfield. Maybe, do you think those would have made a difference? Maybe getting Willemse to play at fullback, just helping with the options for the kicking game, and maybe closer also to help Lebok with just managing the game in the second half. And obviously the carrying ability of Roos at 8, we all know how great he is, and Murat's work rate and just clearing those racks as well. Maybe those ingredients were missing.
So I don't think you lose a hell of a lot by having Daimani at 8. I don't think, like, obviously Roos, I mean, and a lot of people think he's better, and it's a bit of a coin toss, but Roos is the URC Player of the Year, Bork, etc. So, but I don't think you're losing a hell of a lot. The one thing I will say is BJ Dixon is very, very quietly putting in mammoth performances week in and week out. I'm super impressed. His defense has been huge, but I digress. Willemse was very, very quiet. And this is the thing that comes with Damien Willemse, is we're like, you'll have it like he plays 10 for the Boks, and you're like, no, he's a good backup 10, but he's not a 10. Then everyone's like, 12's his place. 12's his place. He must play 12. Then he plays 12, and he was very quiet this weekend. And then I saw people were like, no, 12's not his position. He must play 15. So it's a tough one. I think the Springboks coming back also is challenging, because I think they were really put through the ringer for the last month or 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. So we'll get onto the Sharks, but I mean, guys just didn't look the best. So, they've got to get back. They've got to reintegrate, stuff like that. It shouldn't have been as hard for the Stormers. I did expect more from them, to be honest. Blommetjies was again, same, but different. No, that's not fair. He was good and he was bad in a number of places. Like, no one really stood out in the back line. And I think the Leinster defense really did well to cut them off. But with Lebok and Willemse 10-12, you would have expected a bit more. For me, Ruan now is key. He's key because what he will do is he will move Willemse probably to 15 again. And obviously Ruan now is vital. Dan du Plessis is having a great season. Paul de Vet, who I'm a massive fan of and I thought has been incredible, didn't have a great game. But then Janchis came on and was better, but not better. Like, everyone was really average. There wasn't a player, Dixon possibly, just because of his work rate. Dixon possibly, and maybe the props, because they do a lot of stuff we don't see. And Van Heerden. Other than that, everyone was pretty average. Like average, like not shit, not good. Like they had some shit moments and they had some great moments, but as a whole, no one really, really, really jumped up and said, I'm taking this game on.
Yeah, I think that probably describes it quite well. And I think maybe in some ways, and we're literally going to go to the Sharks now in the next game, I think maybe just reintegrating, the Springboks in some ways hindered the South African teams more than it helped them this weekend's games, because they didn't really seem to be, firing at all cylinders as they would. But looking at the Stormers and their position in the log, they're pretty much, they've qualified for the URC knockouts. So there's no doubt about that. They've also qualified to have at least one home URC knockout game, but they have Ulster right on their tail, 2 points behind them for second place. Even Glasgow can get ahead of them in those last 2 games. They do, though, have Munster and Benneton to look forward to at home. Munster's obviously fighting to stay in the top 8. Benneton's trying to get into the top 8 as well. So there won't be easy games, but 2 games that the Stormers will probably bank on winning. So Stormers should have enough at least to try and secure second place, but they'll hopefully if Ulster and Glasgow win both of their matches, they might be put under pressure to win both of those games as well. And obviously, we're going to talk later about the European games that are happening in the next few weeks. So Stormers aren't really they're almost at the place that they want to be, but they aren't really home and hosed yet. I think if they could have converted this match into a win and the match against Cardiff into a win, because they have 2 draws this season, those 2 matches having 2 wins there puts them at 65 points and pretty much home and host for second place. So almost there for the Stormers.
Yeah, they were looking like they were going to cruise second, and as you've highlighted, they were going to be under pressure. They're going to rue this performance. They will. Whether they finish second or not, I think they're going to look back at this as one of those things. It's very important to go there and win. It doesn't matter which Leinster side you beat. People talk about it and say it's the Rhys Ruddock All Stars and the second stringers and blah blah blah. But it doesn't matter. It's like beating Marty's at Donny Craven. It doesn't matter who you played. Like I don't care if all the guys were off for whatever reason. You want to beat them there, and that changes the way you look at things and how you address it the next time. The next time you step into that onto that field, like you've got different emotions. Mm. Now their gut feel when they got there was like, we really left like points behind, and now we're facing a different side. We've got different focuses, but it's always going to be in the back of their head. Whereas the Leinster youngsters are going to be there. Some of them will be involved, some of them won't be involved. But, they'll be like, shit, we really did what we were supposed to do. And the big boys come back and they're like, our fortress is still standing because of the youngsters. So, they like, we can't waste this now. We can't waste what they did while we were away on island duty.
Shaun, do you rate the big boys, as you called them? They watched this game on Saturday, or were they still nursing, the epic hangovers they had from the Six Nations celebrations?
They definitely watched it. They might have watched it with a little bit of haze, a little bit of partly cloudy, but I'm sure they watched it. I'm sure that they'll all be involved in the pre-match or post-match chatting about it, or they'll be involved. They would have been involved. Imagine possibly all together watching it, having a couple of pints Guinness, a couple of thousand.
No, I'm sure they did. But also Leinster's within the story for qualification for the second teams, because they're going to be on tour, facing the Bulls and the Lions. So they're having a Highveld tour. And now this win basically assures them that they'll probably, the Rhys Ruddock All Stars will have a nice tour of South Africa for the next few weeks. So the Bulls and Lions, I guess the good news for them is that they get not, the full Irish team to play against them. But as this result shows, this is not going to be an easy win for either of those teams to try and get there. So they have to play their best to beat them.
Yeah, it's good for us and for the Bulls and Lions short term. For long term, it's not, because those are the guys we're going to be facing in 3 years' time, 2 years' time. They're going to have the experience of travel. But we also have to look at the now and yes, what it does is it means that Leinster are not going to be full strength for any other game that is not a knockout. So the knockouts, they'll be full strength. I even reckon there'll be a little bit more rest, or they'll probably integrate the guys in. It won't come in one foul swoop, even for the knockouts, I don't think. But we'll see. But it's great. It's great that Leinster you would expect them to be dropping points, and which essentially means that South African sides are gaining them, which is huge.
And then quick news from the Leinster side, news that they don't want to hear, but Johnny Sexton seemingly ruled out for the rest of the domestic season. He has a groin injury. He's going to go into surgery tomorrow. We wish him all the best, of course. But it's surgery as well. But it sounds like for all intents and purposes, he's played his last game for Leinster. I wouldn't rule him out coming back for a Champions Cup final. I think he'd be mad enough to try and do something like that. But I'm sure Andy Farrell will, restrain him with all sorts of chains and locks to try and stop him from, hurting himself even more. So Sexton won't at least feature for the next few weeks at the very, very least. But yeah, you've heard it here first. If he comes back for a URC final against the Stormers or a Champions Cup final, maybe against the Stormers as well, I wouldn't be too surprised.
Yeah, groins are not great, but they're operating, which is it means that they think that they've got enough time to get him back. So yeah. I mean, we obviously don't want him to miss out on the remainder of the season from his personal and Leinster's point of view, but also miss out on the World Cup for Ireland. I mean, this is it for Sexton, mostly.
Yeah, it seems like it's one of those decisions made for the World Cup to go, 100%. Look, you lose him short term, but he's going to be 100% fresh in September. Our friend of the show, Rian Lowe, who obviously was on the show a few weeks ago, he replied to that tweet saying, those absolute lies. He's on holiday in Bali right now.
Exactly. But if we're honest with ourselves, Leinster are not as weak without Johnny Sexton as they used to be. And it's not saying that he's got worse. He's not saying that he's got worse. It's just everyone around is a better player. They're starting to realize they can't rely on him the whole time. So when he puts the hammer down, you can see it, but they can manage without him easily.
Yeah. So let's move on to our other Springbok laden team, the Sharks, and they had a bit of a shocking loss to Scarlets this weekend, losing 32 points to 20. Shaun, I think you introduced at least some of the issues there in talking about the reintroduction of the Springboks, but it just did not happen for the Sharks. It was sort of back to the issues that we had with in the Sean Everett era, with just an inability for the Sharks to play near their best when they've got all their players playing together and having a bit of a confusion of what kind of game plan they're playing. Scarlets are on a great run. They've a lot of people shouting on their Twitter about that they've won, I think, 6 of their last 7 games, and they are pretty much the form team of the URC right now. But I mean, the Sharks should expect to beat them, or at least get a lot closer than they did, especially with their full-strength team back. Shaun, I mean, should we just pop in what we've been saying in the last 2 years about the Sharks after their losses? Is it pretty much same old, same old?
Yeah, interesting. I just want to touch on Scarlets. Scarlets have been bothering me, and I've been keeping an eye on them for a little while, and there's 3 names I'm going to mention, and they are literally tearing down trees. It's Vai Fafita, Sam Lassie, and Sione Kalamafoni. Those 3 together have been immense. But onto the Sharks, I don't even think you need to dive deeper into it and try and find other things that have gone wrong. It's a case of the Springboks have come back, or the first choice side have come back, and they're just a little bit rusty, and they have not connected. And it was clear that they hadn't connected. They've traveled. When you look at it, like front row, Nche, Mbonambi, Detoy, Locks, Etzebeth, Van Heerden, Lustria, Kolisi, Chituka, Buthelezi. Like, we've seen them destroy sides, and they just didn't connect. Hendrickson, Bosch, 9 and 10, Sosa, Mapimpi tried really hard. Jans van Rensburg, Lukanya Vanna Kok, Butcher Chamberlain. Like, this all makes sense to us, and it all looks like a win, And if you look at the bench, I mean, Van Vuren, Mchunu, Sadi, Grobler, Noche, Williams, Tapawai, and Abrams. Like, they've got it. They just didn't bring it. And I actually replied to a tweet on Saturday where it was mentioned the Sharks should have rested their Springboks. They are 10 weeks of being off for 10 matches or something. No, maybe it's not that much. 4 or 5 weeks or whatever. I don't care, whatever the number was of not being there. They should have rested them there and not flown them around the world, and they would have been fine for Saturday. The way I look at it was like bash the rest of the team in the URC, and then you've got to pick one. And the URC came first. Like, they had to have won this URC game. So if they sent a second string side and they got beaten, everyone would be wanting to murder and cause shit because the Sharks are in trouble. So I think they needed to do it. I think they needed to put the guys in. They need to say, cool, everyone's back down to earth. Well done. Have your rest few days. We're flying back home. We've got some big stuff coming on Saturday in the Champions Cup.
Yeah, and I think that brings us to mentioning the log position for the Sharks right now, because as you've said, Shaun, they don't really have the luxury of picking and choosing their battles in the URC because they are in a very precarious position. So the Sharks currently are at 8th, which is good in terms of the URC knockouts, as we know. So let me just describe what the position for them at 8th. So they've got 41 points. Above them, they are still within reach of Connacht, the Bulls, and Munster in 5th, 6th, and 7th. Munster going on a South African tour. They're facing the Sharks themselves in one of those matches, so they can make up points there. Connacht is also a few points ahead of them and the Bulls as well. And below them, the chasing pack are Benneton a point behind, Cardiff 2 points behind, the Lions 3 points behind, and even Ospreys could fancy themselves and Scarlets themselves at 12th and 13th. But what's more important for the Sharks is if the log stays as it is, then because there isn't a Welsh team in the top 8, that means that the top Welsh team, which is Cardiff at the moment, would replace the Sharks as one of the participants in the URC. In the Champions Cup for next season, which means that your Siya Kolisis, your Ebenezabets are going to be playing in Zebre and in Bath and all those crazy places. In the
you got it all wrong. The Sharks are going to win the Champions Cup, so they don't need that 8th place. Come on.
There is a interesting situation where, because I think it's the Sharks and let's say Benetton, there could be a situation where you have the top 7, you have the Sharks win the Champions Cup at 8th, and then Benetton or whoever winning the Challenge Cup at 9th. It means they both automatically qualify for the Champions Cup, which means that there'll be some shenanigans where possibly the 7th place team, the Bulls in this case, would be not qualifying for the URC, for the Champions Cup. So yeah, there's a few calculators and permutations that we all have to be aware of. But yeah, basically the Sharks are in a very precarious position right now. That means that every game from this weekend against Munster until the end of the season is a must-win game for them.
Can I just, something that I've just picked up, and so the Sharks are, we know how logs work and all. The Sharks are the first side that have a negative points difference. Come on, man. The Bulls are plus 44, Connacht are plus 13, but the Sharks, who are in 8th, currently are minus 4. They got a minus 4 points difference. And then everyone else below them all minus. No, man. This is cuck.
No, that's definitely the way to describe it. But it shows, the Sharks have 8 wins and 8 losses. It just shows how Jekyll and Hyde they've been this season. That there's been times where it looks like, oh, okay, something's happening here, or we've waxed lyrical about the Sharks, in the few months before this when Neil Powell came onto the scene. But they had a horrible start, of course, with Everett, which was the reason why he was fired. And they just, they had the games over the Six Nations, which they didn't win at home. And now, look, they've lost this game now in Wales. So they've just gone from a place where it looked like, okay, they're going to be fine. They'll be in that 6th, 7th, or 5th, 6th area in the log and, can still, cause some issues for teams, to now a place where they're hanging on by a thread to try and qualify for the Champions Cup next season.
But the Bulls in 7th, the Sharks in 8th, Benetton in 9th, Cardiff in 10th, and Lions in 11th have all played 8 and lost 8. It's a bun fight, but we expected more. The irony, when looking back now in hindsight, we'll look back. The Sharks more so, but the Sharks and the Bulls we probably would have done better with everything if the Sharks and the Bulls were playing in the Challenge Cup this year.
Yeah,
we've spread ourselves thin. The thing is as South Africans, this is new, and we highlighted it moving forward, moving into this space. especially moving into the European, the first time European competition, which is this year, is our sides need to learn how to balance. We need to pick our fights. It takes a lot to win Europe and domestic. It takes a lot. You've got to pick something. Your first and foremost, your choice should be to be challenging and be in the knockouts of your domestic and qualify for the Champions Cup in that way. And then you go to the Champions Cup. And once you get there, you can start balancing things out. Because I know there was a lot of talk when Leinster sent, like a couple of Irish sides have sent some makeshift teams in inverted commas.
Yeah.
But there's reasons behind that. One is you get to blood youngsters, and the other is you get to balance and you get to sort stuff out. You got to pick fights. But you can't be in a position the Sharks and the Bulls are in now, because you can't pick a fight then. You have to, the Bulls and the Sharks should have won this weekend, which would have allowed them to pick up the round of 16 competition this weekend coming and had a free go at it. Now they're in a position where they probably need to kind of put all their eggs in the URC basket and go and win and qualify for the Champions Cup next year, because you have to qualify for it to make more money. But sometimes you can't just win it all, you know?
Yeah, and Leo Cullen, the coach at Leinster, made this point exactly this time last year when Leinster did, as you said, send the Rhys Ruddock All Stars to South Africa last year, and it's proven to be a cropper for the teams. I mean, yeah, you can say maybe the Stormers haven't necessarily rested their players as much as the Sharks have tried to, and the Bulls have been trying to play with two squads, but it hasn't really served them well, because they've still struggled to get the wins. But yeah, I think it's quite clear that now the Sharks are in a situation where every Saturday is a big Saturday, and it might, arguably, some might say, might actually serve them well to fall out of the Champions Cup as quick as possible to try and win those last two games. But again, arguably, like Shaun has mentioned, this might be their best route into the Champions Cup next season to win the whole thing. But as we know, that won't be an easy task, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Then finally, Shaun, I mean, we will talk about sort of the Munster game in particular, but you read out that 23, and it's a pretty scary 23 for the Sharks. Are there any changes that you would make to it for the upcoming game, or do you think it's a case of stick with the same team? It'll hopefully bear fruit.
Sure. I wouldn't mind starting Williams, but I think that's more like a favoritism thing. Jaden Hendricks is by far the better 9 of the two, but they do offer something completely different. And when any 9 isn't working, it shows. So there's that. I wouldn't make any changes. I think they are strong enough and good enough, and they're mature enough to know that they just really didn't represent against Scarlets. And they're going home now. The fans have been frustrated. The fans saw the breaking of a new dawn when Neil Powell got involved, and now it's gone back to frustrating times with losses. They expect more. I don't think it was ever a quick fix. I'm like I said a while ago, let's just wait for preseason next year and see what happens. But they've got to get through the season first. So I think it's just a case of every single one of the players have to reflect about what they're doing and how they're doing it, and they've got to pull together. And to be honest, with the personnel they've got there, they can totally, that's the kind of team that could probably put 30 or 40 on a Champions Cup side in the next 2 weeks. Like they've got that, And
then lose to Zebre the next week.
Don't even start that shit.
But let's move to the next game. Well, let's maybe end on a good note. So let's move to the Bulls losing to Ulster. Winning, Ulster won 32 points to 23. quite clear from the start of the game that Ulster was sort of the team ahead. And Bulls. Yeah, the main thing that I saw on social media was the Bulls have just been horrible travelers throughout the season, and they possibly didn't get the rap of the green with some of the decisions made on the field by the officiating team, but we won't really focus too much on that. But it's just been a continuation of a theme for the Bulls that it's a completely different side that plays in Loftus versus the side that goes away overseas. And I think they've felt almost the brunt of maybe the traveling maybe conditions that the cycling teams have a lot more than the other teams have, because they've really struggled to put in good performances away from home.
Well, your beloved Bulls are also 4 losses in a row at Loftus in Currie Cup and URC. Their last 4 games they lost. Like they're also kind of circling around the drain. There's problems there. I tell you, for Ulster, the starting players that had 2 on their back, Tom Stewart and Stuart Moore, were flipping immense. But anyway, so was Jacob Stockdale, to be fair. But yeah, man, like I expected them to do better. For Mark and Nokia got like involved and were really putting in a lot of work. Marco van Staden was like in that shit good category of like, he did some good stuff and there was some bad stuff. Carl Brink was there. Ulrich Loh was really trying hard. Berger and Smith were so. Forster and Hendricks. So I actually thought about it this weekend and it really pains me, but Cornell Hendricks, his form or him as a player has changed since last year. We're not talking about him as much anymore. Doesn't matter whether he's playing on the wing or in the midfield. Like he's something's going on there, and I don't know if it's a constant changing of everything. I think everyone's not working, but the one shining light was Moody and Aronso were great together, but they were great together on attack and open play, which is we know is like their bread and butter. But then everywhere else it was there and thereabouts. So yeah, it was tough. I think Bismarck got a really shitty yellow card. It was really like it's hard to look at that and justify like a call was made, the right call. But that was a poor decision.
Can I say very quickly something? Can I say very quickly? It seemed like it was refed on results, on obviously Burn staying down and the whiplash more so than Bismarck. I mean, it was a bit of a cheap shot from Bismarck, to be fair. I think he saw number 10 in a prone position and his eyes lit up. But it was below the neck shoulder area. I think at worst that's maybe a penalty, but it shouldn't have necessarily been going into more sanction there.
If he was like, it's reckless and therefore dangerous, even though you didn't make contact, we're going to give you a yellow card, there had been shit, but we'd understand it. But the reason for his yellow card was not on, like what they said. So I think it was a case of like, we want to give him a yellow card and they'd got the wording wrong. We want to give him a yellow card for what had happened because it wasn't the right shot. But I'm trying to think back now. I don't even think it was a yellow card worthy. I think it was penalty at most. But is what it is. Like the loss wasn't because of that. That's the one important thing you need to look at. Like there were a few things that there were guys were highlighting because South Africans, well, to be honest, any team that loses a game that you thought you were competitive in, or that you were going to be competitive in, you'll find a reason to find out like little things. So the Bulls were not at the races. That's like, if you're honest with yourself, like even if they'd won the game because of some of those calls, you'd know deep down that they were lucky, very lucky to win that game if they did. So I think that's the most important thing. And again, the Bulls are going to now do some work. I mean, they're away to Toulouse this weekend, are they not? Same, very small squad.
Yes.
Not very small squad, but they've taken, it's a smallish squad for the 2 weeks. I think they were banking on getting a point or two out of this game. I don't think they are planning on anything on advancing after Toulouse. I think
not really.
It's
judging
hard.
by our
Like,
squad.
you want to be positive and you want to be like, listen, we're in with a shot. Like, we deserve to be here. But then you look at what's happening, and Jake White has been the most outspoken about this. He's been the most clear on what is required to win and be competitive domestically and in Europe. And he's also very much been like, we've got to pick our races to run. So I think that is why they took that small squad. I think they were like, cool, first game up, Ulster, we want you to get points. If you don't get points, we're under pressure, but it's okay. We're going to go with a similar same game plan. We're going to we want to obviously win. We want to beat Toulouse. They are going to go out. They're not going to go out to lose. They're going to go out to win and to push them hard. If you can get Toulouse to be off kilter and then you're in with the shot, then go and win, obviously. But if they don't win this game, no one is going to say, this Bulls team is shit. Like, it's Toulouse and it's in France and it's the Bulls side that have been struggling. But then the Bulls really have to really get their shit together for the rest of the URC. Like, that's the same as the Sharks. Like, do whatever you want in Europe, but the URC is where it all is.
Yeah, so the Bulls, I mean, copy-paste what I said about the Sharks in their log position. They're just slightly ahead of the Sharks at 43 points. But they also ultimately have to basically try and win those last two games. They are facing, I guess, good news for them as opposed to the Sharks. The Sharks have quite difficult games against Munster and Benneton at home. But the Bulls have, the Rhys Ruddock All Stars, who are not an easy game, but also not a tough game, and Zebre at home in those two double-header games that are going to be happening in the Highveld. So they should, more so than the Sharks, they should be fancying their chances of getting 2 wins from that. And 2 wins will probably secure them into the top 7, which is what they need for Champions Cup qualification. So they can't drop those 2 games. I think, as you said, Shaun, no one's going to really fret too much if they lose to Toulouse this weekend. Like, as long as the performance is decent, like, no one's going to have too much to say about that. Toulouse is Toulouse. But those next 2 games, if they don't manage to get the points against Leinster and Zebre and are, in that precarious 8th position or even lower, that's going to be a bit of a fail for the season. And yeah, I guess, and AP Cronje, obviously another Bulls fan and friend of the show, he, I think, summarized the Bulls season quite well. They probably overachieved last year and they definitely underachieving this
year. Yes. That's, I actually also, I'll read that. It's a great summary. This is also, it's really hard for fans of a side, especially the Bulls, who've been so successful in Super Rugby. And we all looked at going to Europe for a long time as a subpar competition. Then the Stormers go and win it last year, and beat the Bulls in the final. We're thinking, cool, we've got this. And then we were all led into this false sense of security. And this is still a learning curve. But we fans do not subscribe to that. We're not like, cool, you get some time. Like the Sharks. They were like, okay, cool, Neil Powell's in. Fix it. Boom, fixed now. And it's not happening. Neil Powell's like, I'm director of rugby. I'll go in and coach. But let's be honest, he's not a 15-a-side coach or an experienced one. So hopefully Plum comes back, but he's looking at bolstering up everything. So he's no doubt secured a freebie until the end of the season. But sorry, that's possibly disrespectful. I think you can't judge him on this season, no matter what happens. But he'll be under pressure next season, no matter what, because of his squad, because of what has happened and what is expected of him. Fans, he's using this to learn. He's learning stuff that Dobson and Jake White learned last year and this year. So, like, there could be a rocky road for the Sharks moving forward. But yeah, the fans there's no freebies. You want to win. The guys at Loftus want to win all the time. They've lost 4 in a row. Like, then they go and lose to Ulster. Okay, like, let's be honest, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's a Bull side, you want them to win. They got to lose, but then you're right. When they come back home, They need to get those turnstiles ringing over, not with the opposition running through their defense, with the fans coming back and drinking copious amounts of brandy and coke.
I'm sure Willem Strauss will make sure that is the case as well for those two double headers. Let's move to the shining light of the weekend from South African perspective, which is our Emirates Lions.
Who would have thought?
They are also crazy enough. 8 wins and 8 losses, same as the Sharks and the Bulls right now. Only 5 points behind the Bulls, and within spitting distance of qualifying for the URC knockouts and qualifying for the big table at Europe. All doing this while eating hot dogs on tour.
Exactly, and and who would have thought? If I told you there was one South African side that won in the URC this weekend, just one, you would never ever have said it was the Lions. Have we been transported back to, what was it, 2017? When were Lions killing it in Super Rugby?
2016, yeah.
Yeah, that was when it happened. But other than that, the Lions have always been there and thereabouts, but below the big boys, with respect. And now the Lions are like, yeah, screw you guys, we'll show you. Hot dogs and people coming in and looking at us naked in the showers. But, it is what it is. They're going out and performing. So that's brilliant. And then it was me, I must put my hand up, it was me that sent out that tweet that asked how the Stormers, Bulls and Sharks fans were feeling. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, the Lions were like, screw you, buddy, we'll show you. And then, I didn't even ask how the Lions were feeling. Meanwhile, the Lions are like, this is a cakewalk.
Yeah, you probably provided their motivation there, Shaun, which is, good at least in perspective. But yeah, as we said earlier, the Benneton went ahead in the first half. It seemed like they actually had this game sewn up, just judging by their performance in the first half. I think they were leading 21 points to 10 at some stage. And then the Lions, through a 5 or almost 5 to 10 minutes period, with tries from Chituka, 2 tries from Chituka and 1 from Makane, they just said, no, we're taking this game back and we're going to win this game. And they're able to, to overcome Benneton, 32 points to 28. As for the people that listened to Rian Lowe's episode when he was a guest, he talked a lot and sang the praises of Franke Horn. And I think Franke Horn, the more I'm looking at it, the more I realize that Franke Horn is probably the key player for the Lions right now. He seems to be the one that puts everything together. There's a lot of balance to that loose trio of Chituka and Fenta as well. If he plays, and if he plays well, it seems like the Lions will play well. I wonder, I'm sure that there'll be some form of stat that says that the Lions are 8-4 with Franke Horn playing, and or 0-4 when Franke Horn's not playing.
Yeah, he's good. The Lions, they scored 3 tries in 7 minutes to completely flip the game on the head. And the one thing about the Lions, when they got their tails up, it's awesome. They play, so it was great. I think an unsung hero and someone that everyone has been waiting to put in a big performance, and there's been injuries and whatnot, but 77 minutes from Willem Alberts, the bone collector. That was needed. It was needed. He played 77 minutes not because they planned it, because they needed him. And it was good. I'm still a little bit. I think I'm not so sure about Russ at 13. I don't know. I'm not convinced. I think I probably would like to see something else, but it's really hard to tell a team that they didn't play well when they won, or tell an individual they didn't play well in a team when they won. So that was the only thing that I think it's probably more to look back and maybe watch him more myself and get people's opinion on it. But yeah, good. I just didn't see it coming for a while, and then those 3 tries changed everything. But I will say that the Rabs try, I thought they destroyed it. I thought they pooed it. I really did. There was In fact, was it Horn? It was Horn that was running that line. What's the
Yes.
cameraman's name? You told me earlier.
Oh, let's get the name of the cameraman.
It's a legend. His name needs to be spoken.
Please delay me a little, or like go on so I can get the name very quickly.
So I tell you, firstly we'll share this trial, because the cameraman running the touchline, you get to see an before and not yet seen angle of rugby that we're not used to seeing. But I really thought Horn. So Horn is broken down the side. He's got options left and right, and he puts in a dummy kind of step, or was it a step? Can't remember. And he beats a defender. I'm like, awesome. You've got to play fast man now. You have to play a fast man. And then he freaking does it again. He steps someone, and I'm thinking, I was pulling my hair out, going, I can't believe you've destroyed. You've got two men on your inside, and they're both backs, and you've got one back on your outside. And before he did that second step, I thought he couldn't play Rabs on the right, because I didn't think he had the run. And then he's gone and stepped him, and then offloaded, and Rabs has just cruised in because he had nothing to do. Before that, he had to beat players. I couldn't believe it. I really thought he destroyed it. And the best part is we have the most unbelievable footage of it. But sure, you must watch it from all the angles. Watch it from the top, watch it from the sideline. But it was incredible. What a run.
Yeah, so the cameraman's name is Andrea Scialpi.
Legend.
I'm saying it right.
Knight him.
I think he's
given the keys to the city.
Performer of the weekend. Performer of the weekend for Benneton right there. Just an epic camera angle. And just the ability and the pace to keep up with. I mean, Franke Horn's obviously he's not a wing, but he's not slow.
He's a professional athlete. But yes, it almost looked like there was a drone, like someone was flying a drone behind play. That's the kind of thing. You're like, I also thought of that when I saw that. I was like, holy smokes, this guy, he's not just running, he's running with the camera. I was like,
ridiculous.
What?
Absolutely ridiculous. And it's put the Lions in a very interesting position in the log as well. So as I've said earlier, they're also in that fight for the last few places in the for the Champions Cup qualification. Only 3 points behind the Sharks for qualification for the top 8, and then 5 points behind the Bulls for the Champions Cup qualification. So they've got two matches as well. They're facing the same opponents as the Bulls, which is Leinster and Zebre. So obviously one way for them to improve is to try and match the Bulls or better the Bulls' results so they can sort of keep up with them. But with the fact that, Benneton is one of the teams traveling and they're ahead of them, the Sharks are obviously facing some of those teams. There's going to be some movement that if the Lions play their cards right and they win two matches that, in all honesty, they should win, they could put themselves in a position where they're the guest in the party that no one expected for. As Shaun said earlier, we didn't even really expect them to be, in this conversation, but here they are, and they're still staying in this party for as long as possible. So,
do you see the
very
trend?
Interesting opportunity.
Do you see the trend? The same thing happened last year with the Stormers. Think about it. We didn't see the Stormers, but probably the first half of the season. We didn't see. We were like, the Stormers might get relegated from a competition that has no relegation. That's how bad they looked. Then they went on the greatest run ever, but it wasn't a fluky run. They dominated and they cooked, and then this won. And now the Lions, hello. Just saying.
They're still, they're well within the competition there. And I mean, and maybe let's start now by talking about the European matches to come. So on the Challenge Cup side, we have the Lions facing
Racing.
Having a big match on Saturday facing Racing at home. I'm sure Cooks will make sure if that team is dropped and they see that Finn Russell's playing, he'll make sure that he's there.
Yes.
But given this opportunity for them to possibly win in the URC, I wonder if they might not, rest a few players and not play their best team for that game against Racing, or do they try and see that? Do they try and maybe go for it for qualification? Because just going through the other matches in the Challenge Cup, it's Bristol at home against Clermont. So you would probably expect Bristol to hopefully get their season going, and Clermont won't necessarily be the best travellers away. You've got the informed Scarlets against Brive. You've got Toulon playing the Cheetahs, and Toulon playing at home. Cheetahs, unfortunately, going from the Griffins to Toulon. Good luck. You've got Stade France against Lyon in a French derby. I think both teams are probably having more than an eye on the top 14. Benneton playing Connacht as well, the great URC derby. Glasgow against Dragons as well. Glasgow will try to keep their form up. And then the Lions playing Racing at home, and then Cardiff playing Sale at home as well. So I don't know, maybe it might be wiser for the Lions to go, look, the Currie Cup team can try to play this game. Let's rest the likes of Horn and Chutuka and the key players there, so that we can really go for those two big matches against Leinster and Zebre next week.
Racing are currently in 7th in the top 14. They just it was Derby round and they beat Stade Francais this weekend, but Racing are in 7th. They need to be in 6th to qualify for the playoffs. And if I'm not mistaken, the top 8 qualify for Europe, but the top 6 Champions Cup, I'm not sure about how that works in the top 14. But Racing are not sending a full strength side. There's no ways. There'll be a couple of big boys there, but they're not sending a full strength side. This is a chance for the Lions to beat Racing. Racing, probably they're not having the greatest season. They've won 11, drawn 1, and lost 9. They are going to be focusing on making the playoffs in the top 14. It would be diabolical if they didn't. With the side with that money and those players to not make the playoffs, it would be huge. They'd be shit. So no,
are you calling Racing the Paris Sharks?
Oh, or the Paris Toulon from 5 years ago. So yeah, it's they won't fly for that. So Challenge Cup is going to be they'll use it to bring players back that need some minutes, a couple of important guys to have as like the experience and the spine, a couple of youngsters they want to look at, stuff like that. But I think the Lions have got a great opportunity to roll them. That poses other questions which you have rightfully highlighted. That means next week there's playoff. Following week there's knockouts again, and then you got to focus on the URC. So there, it would be interesting if you're going to rest your side against Racing, and you win. You then have to play your big boys in the quarterfinal. You don't want to waste that opportunity, or do you?
Yeah.
Then they're going to be off for 2 weeks. Because it's 2 weeks of European rugby. So do you play your full strength boys and think, oh shit, we might actually then have to play them the following week, and then for the URC the couple of weeks after, then the load becomes too much. So if you rest your guys in this round, you give them 2 weeks off because they're going to play URC in 3 weekends time. Or if you play your big boys now, you might be forced to play them again next week. Or do you give up the quarterfinal? Nobody wants that.
Yeah, and given that teams are also, we haven't really mentioned it this much, but they're also playing the Currie Cup, and obviously, especially for the Lions, who maybe, in the case of like Cash van Rooyen and the coaching staff, maybe want to have a good performance in the Currie Cup so they can, keep their jobs and stuff. Like, it is a very difficult balance to carry off as well. So the Lions, if they win their match against Racing, they'll be facing the winner of Glasgow and Dragons, probably Glasgow at this stage. Glasgow will probably be the home team. So they'll then travel to Scotland and then come back to South Africa. So Shaun, I think you've convinced me that maybe they should just play their best team this weekend, have a go at it. Maybe in the quarterfinal, that's the one where I wouldn't say rest the whole team, but maybe the likes, your key players, I think you'd keep them at home to prepare for, the Leinster and Zebre matches.
Interesting. Interesting.
So maybe let's go through very quick predictions for the last 16. So Toulon versus the Cheetahs. Toulon playing at home.
Yes, Toulon. Sorry.
And then Stade France against Lyon. Lyon are fourth in the top 14. Stade France are third, just a point ahead of them. So they're very evenly matched.
I think home side wins that. It's a French derby, and Stade lost this weekend, so I think home side wins.
Okay. Benneton versus Connacht.
Connacht.
I'll go Benetton. I think the Italian boys didn't come back. All of them didn't come back for this match against the Lions. So I think they'll bolster the team. I think they're a dark horse to win this whole thing, possibly.
Good shot.
Cardiff against the Sharks, the Sale Sharks, that is. Cardiff playing at home.
Yeah, that's interesting. I
Sale
think
has to
Sale
go
will
for
win.
it, don't they?
I think Sale win because I think they're just too good at the moment. Cardiff are going to be putting up. Cardiff could be, yeah. I think Sale win that. I think Cardiff take it easy.
Yeah, Cardiff is trying to fight off the other, or at least two of the other Welsh teams to try and qualify automatically for the Champions Cup because they're at 10th and they're at the top of the Welsh Shield. So, yeah, I think they do take it easy, as you've said. One of those other teams is Scarlets. They're facing Breve. Breve are bottom of the top 14 log. I don't think if Scarlets even played their third team, Breve would let them.
And they're playing in Wales, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Scarlets win. And
then in that bracket, it's Bristol against Clermont. Bristol haven't had the best season. They kind of are picking up right now. They're still at, they've won 7 and lost 9. So it hasn't been great. Obviously, they've made a few big signings in the off season. But Clermont also not necessarily in the race for top 8 in the top 14. So maybe this is the way for them to qualify for the Champions Cup is to try and win this because they'll look through the rest of the competition and fancy their chances against most of the other sides.
I think that could be the game of the weekend because I think Bristol also target the Challenge Cup to kind of save their season. So I'm going to go with a home win for Bristol.
I think it will be the second away win, so I'll say Clermont in this one. Yeah, I have a feeling. I have a small feeling.
Nice.
I think it might be a Clermont Benetton final, but that's getting a bit ahead of myself. Glasgow Warriors against Dragons. Glasgow just playing brilliantly right now. Dragons are the Dragons.
Yeah, Warriors win for me.
And then, I think you've convinced me that the Lions are going to play their first team against the Racing, under 14s or whatever the case may be. So Lions to win against that team.
I don't know what's going to happen, but I reckon the Lions win.
And the big question, and Cooks will be listening to this part, does Finn Russell make the trip?
No chance.
Shame.
No, not happening.
I can see the tickets skyrocketing if they say breaking Finn Russell, Gail Fiku, and the boys are making it. I sense it'll probably be South African boys that
Spring.
Yeah.
No,
okay, so let's go to the big table, the Champions Cup, and big matches happening all over. Just a quick preview for the South African team. So the Stormers are facing the Harlequins in Cape Town at the weekend. Harlequins aren't really playing that well in the Premiership. They're languishing there at 8th place. They are still in the fight to qualify for the Champions Cup and to qualify for the knockout. They're still within reach for the top 6, but they lost that big match against Saracens at the Tottenham Stadium. Saracens basically little brother them. Because they just showed that you can do all your fancy Harlequin stuff, but you have to play real rugby to win these things. Stormers, but they play the right amount of chaos that the Stormers will appreciate. I think this will probably be the game of the weekend, attraction-wise, but I think the Stormers have to try and tighten up the game a little bit. I think it plays into the Harlequins' hands if they open the game up a bit too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll agree with you there, but I think we're in for a cracking game because the Quins have got something to prove, and the Stormers are playing at home, and I think deep down the Stormers are also going to be like, we'll show you who's the more exciting.
Yeah, I can see that just going from end to end pretty much. And yeah, also a Money Libok versus Marcus Smith battle will be very interesting to watch.
Yeah.
I think that'll be probably the game of the weekend. And then going to Durban, the Sharks are hosting Munster. Munster have the opportunity of possibly being in South Africa for the next 4 weeks, depending on how results go and in other competitions as well. So they're facing Sharks in Durban this weekend. They've got all their locks back finally. Achia Snyman has finally made his return. And the Sharks obviously are the walking wounded at the moment with after their loss to the Scarlets. Shaun, yeah, it's going to be. I think this might also be a sneaky one where Munster, they probably fancy their chances to do well in this game.
Absolutely. And they do want to come here and kind of lay down the law. They're also had an iffy start to the season under new coaching and management and all that. They've put a couple of good games together. So they're really going to be traveling over probably next to the Sharks on the way back home. Oh, no, that's right. The Sharks are doing a round the world trip first. My bad. Munster will be flying direct. But I think Munster will really be fancying themselves for a win this weekend. And conversely, the Sharks are going to be like, we really, really have to get the show back on the road. So we're in for a cracking game.
And then the final South African featuring game is the Bulls facing Toulouse in Toulouse. Yeah, I don't think it gets worse than that really for in the Champions Cup. You don't really want to go to Dublin. You don't really want to go to Toulouse to face Toulouse right there. So, I mean, the Bulls have done, big, shocking victories away from home last season. But yeah, this is almost another level.
Yeah. Toulouse are really going to be wanting to win the whole thing. So they're going to be naming full strength. Bulls are going to be naming the strongest side they can with the squad that they have, and are going to hope to be competitive. I think this is an ego thing. You want to be competitive. Whether you lose or not, you want to get into that changing room afterwards and go, we really, really played well against one of Europeans' best sides.
Mm. So we'll see how that goes, and yeah, maybe the possibility of an upset there as well. So let's go through the matches like we did for the Challenge Cup, for the Champions Cup. Let's start at the top of the bracket. Leinster facing Ulster in an Irish derby. Leinster, as we've said, without Johnny Sexton, possibly one or two others ouchies for the island players. I think Andrew Porter's also a doubt for this game, and Kelleher, and maybe Caelan Doris as well. So not quite the full Irish contingent coming back, but a lot of them will come back. Do they beat an Ulster team which has been inconsistent at times, but have just managed to put themselves in a good position for the rest of the season?
It's really hard to get past Leinster in this, but I tell you, Ulster had the best prep this weekend with that win. So they are putting their hand up. Ulster very quietly moving up the URC as well. Should I use my my wild card now? Ulster to beat Leinster.
Ooh, spicy. I don't think it's too out of the question. I think there is some ingredients coming together for this. And look, whispered quietly, but I think Andy Farrell will be very happy if that is the case, because that means his Leinster boys aren't really playing that many big games for the rest of the season. Yeah, but the great thing for Leinster is their first team basically doesn't have to leave Dublin for the next 2 months, because all of the URC games, the knockout games, are going to be in Dublin, and all of the Champions Cup games are going to be in Dublin. So they would be fine if they had to stay and play these games. So yeah, I'll still go Leinster, but yeah, the Ulster pick is not a bad pick. The other side of that bracket is Leicester Tigers playing against Edinburgh. Leicester Tigers having a bit of a so-so up and down season, but a player I'm sure you've heard of if you're a South African, Andrea Pollard, seems to be playing in the form of his life right now, really playing really well. And Edinburgh, they've just really sunk quite badly. They're 13th in the URC. They're just not playing well at all. So probably an easy Leicester win here at home.
Yeah, I'm super impressed with Pollard's form over the last 4 or 5 games as well. It's very important for the Springboks, let alone Leicester. But yeah, Leicester to take this one.
Yeah, just quickly on Pollard, is it just a matter of, just him getting confidence and consistently playing, because he didn't necessarily have that in Montpellier because he was playing mostly at centre. So he's just really being able to, build the team around himself.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to it. I think there were a couple of long-term injury issues that he's sorted out. But it's all come together with fitting into the Leicester Tigers approach. He really is the right man for the job for Tigers and the way that they play. And that's all come together with him coming back from injury, also hitting some good form as well, and really enjoying the Premiership environment. So I think, it's great for Leicester, but more importantly, it's great for the Springboks.
Okay, so Leicester winning that game, and then they'll face the similarly named cousins from Ireland. Toulouse versus the Bulls.
Toulouse. Next.
Yeah, I can't even convince myself of that. Sharks versus Munster in Durban.
Oh. I'm stuck between head and heart here, and they're both kind of fighting with each other because the Sharks are going to win. The Sharks are going to come right, and they're going to win, and they're going to salvage this season.
Look, yeah, I think I'll use my surprise card in this game and say Munster shocks the Sharks in Durban, and hopefully maybe in some ways helps the Sharks to try and sort themselves out for the URC. So yeah, maybe Munster does them a favor in the long term. But yeah, I Munster also just have that, I don't know what you call it, but that's cup, history and tradition. So they probably are the team that knows best how to win in these games. So I can imagine them doing it even in Durban, in a humid Durban as well. Then on the other side of the draw, you have La Rochelle facing Gloucester. Gloucester, they've been a very attractive team. They're playing really nice rugby in Premiership, but then they haven't really converted those attractive games to wins, being at 9th. La Rochelle, they've basically been chugging along quite well. They're one of the top seeds. They're quite close to Toulouse in the top 14. They are looking to defend their title.
Yeah, Gloucester not in great form at the moment, but La Rochelle also got a point to prove, and playing at home, we can't underestimate the French sides at home. They're a different beast. So yeah, La Rochelle probably going to take this one comfortably for me.
Okay, and then that other game in that bracket is Saracens versus Ospreys. Ospreys did really well in the pool stages, beating I think Montpellier and Leicester. And Saracens are Saracens, top of the log in England. All their English players are back. You saw how angry they were against Harlequins. So I'd probably predict a Saracens win here.
Yes, it would be one of the upsets of the weekend if Ospreys would. It really would. Like they're great and in great form, but they're not Saracens good.
Yeah, and I think those England players for Saracens have a few points to prove and to shut a few critics up. Then a weird game between two teams that aren't really in the best form and are maybe in transition. Exeter versus Montpellier. I think half the Exeter team is going to Montpellier next season. I'm just not sure how to predict this game at the moment. Exeter's playing at home. Montpellier is like 9th, I think, in the top 14. They've just fallen off a cliff with their form. But they have, the big guns in that team that can really turn a game around here. So what do you think, Shaun?
Mate, I don't know. Watching Exeter yesterday, I was, Bath, it was a great performance by Bath, and I'm so glad. but Exeter have really dropped off in the last 3 years. Like, really. You say Montpellier have fallen off a cliff this season. Exeter have done it over the last 3 seasons. They've just really not, they're not that side anymore. I think Montpellier could sneak this and pile on the woes.
Yeah, I think it's one of those. It also seems like Exeter just are going to end their era on more of a whimper than a bang. So I can see them losing. Hopefully that in a way helps them. I think both teams would actually not mind not being in the Champions Cup, so they can focus on qualifying for next season. So it'll be interesting to see how both of them go. But then on the other side of the bracket, because the other reason for that is the winner of that game probably has to travel to Cape Town for the next week because they'll have to face the Stormers and they're facing Harlequins, as we mentioned. The battle of the attractive rugby teams. Smith versus Lebok, Don Brown versus Daimani. You've got a lot of those matchups happening. Marla versus Kitshoff as well. But yeah, Shaun, who wins?
So if you are right and Ruan Null is back, then Stormers win. If Ruan Null is not back, then Harlequins win.
Oh, okay. I think that's a big call. I'm hoping it's the Stormers win because
Me too. I am
that
hoping
might be
yeah.
And it might be the only home games we see in the. Actually, I made a mistake there. Chiefs do have a higher seeding than the Stormers, so if the Chiefs win, they will then host the Stormers in the quarterfinal. So hopefully Montpellier wins so that the Stormers can play 2 weekends. In Cape Town and try to really make a push for the semi-final. But yeah, Shaun, I think those are big games to look forward to weekend. And then just a quick shout out for the Women's Six Nations and the Women's Box team. So the Women's Six Nations, big shout out to Sarah Hunter, who has retired after 14 years playing for England, 140 odd caps. I think she's the highest capped women's player for England, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, she played her last game at home in Newcastle, and yeah, it was the England won that quite easily against Scotland, 58 points to 7. Wales also winning 31 points to 5 against Ireland. Great game for Wales, beating just learning from how they played in the World Cup last year, and then France won a game in basically torrential rain, 22 points to 12 against Italy. So it seems like things are going relatively to form right now. Shaun, yeah, just a quick word on the Six Nations.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch a lot, so I just kind of picked up what I saw on some socials and whatnot. But I think, I'm loving how the tournament has unfolded. It by playing it on its own, the standalone. There've been some great results, but also some great support. It's becoming a beast on its own, which is great for the women's game, and hopefully it flows into the rest of the women's games in the world around. But yeah, it's exciting. The Six Nations is great. It doesn't matter whether you're watching the men's, the women's, or the under-20s. It's flipping world class.
Yeah, and then not on the best note to end off, but the women's box team played in Madrid this weekend against Canada. Canada obviously finished in the semi-finals in the Rugby World Cup, so they're obviously a really good team, even though they're not professional yet. Canada won 6 points to 7, but this was after an early red card in the 6th minute for the box for Katha Jacobs for a dangerous tackle. They also lost Bazise Hele to injury during the first half. And then just things didn't go well from there. So they lost 66 points to 7. I guess it's one of those games where you just are probably learning more about what the top standard is, more so than, able to take much more from that.
Yeah, it's tough after the World Cup. We were hoping obviously for more. I didn't realize that we'd lost a Cesar Hele in the game, but I did see the early red card, which is not great against Canada. They're a very strong side. So yeah, we've got another game coming up this week, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm glad that the ladies are getting out and playing. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like going out, touring, doing stuff, doing professional stuff, because that's what we need. We need the side to experience we blooded four new players. I think there were three on debut starting and one off the bench. So it's great. It's great to see, and long may it continue.
Yeah, and also new coaching staff and everything. So yeah, it's a new era for the women's box team. But that is it for the Rugby Bits episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and follow us on all the social media pages, and like and share this rugby podcast with the rest of the rugby world as well, and subscribe and download all of our episodes as well. And yeah, we're so excited to talk about the next few weeks of big rugby there in the Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup, and we will see you and talk to you about all of that later as well.